Well, few would have guessed it. Middlesbrough are top of the championship after 5 games, 13 points from those 5 for Michael, not Michael Carrick's side anymore, Rob Edwards' team in, because there's been a change of coach in the summer. And I think this new approach has really worked for Middlesbrough. I think if you look at Aidan Morris and Hayden Hackney have been possibly the best midfield pairing in the championship so far this season. So Middlesbrough are absolutely flying. But then you go to Stoke City, 12 points from 5 games for Mark Robbins' side, who beat Birmingham 1-0, with Divock Mbama looking like an inspired acquisition on loan from Manchester City. What about Bristol City as well? No signs of regression after losing head coach Liam Manning to Norwich City after reaching the playoffs last season. They're on 11 points after 5 games. Leicester, almost a surprise as well, with 10 points from their first 5, because as much as we could say Leicester have a parachute payment club still with plenty of the squad that won the title at this level in 23-24, there was a bit of a negative feeling around the Foxes going into the campaign, certainly with some off-field question marks, but they're getting it right on the field with 10 points to their name. So too are West Bromwich Albion under Ryan Mason, and that's going to be the topic this evening. We're going to be talking about the high flyers in the championship at this early stage. So if you like what we do here, you can do us a massive favour by getting subscribed to us on YouTube and on Spotify. Delighted to be joined, as usual, by my co-host, Ollie Mann from Sheffield United Way. Sheffield United Way, even they don't even use the yield. How are you,
we'll
Ollie?
get sued. We'll get sued if we use the yield, Gab. So we'll stick to Sheffield United Way and make sure we're going. I'm having a weird day, Gab, in all honesty with you. Obviously, there's news afoot at Sheffield United, and there's changes and tweaks, and maybe in 5 games' time we'll be one of the teams fighting up there towards the top of the league. But I've been on Calendar doing our local news to talk about it. I'm on Radio 5 Live later. We've got our own stuff going out on Sheffield United Way, covering Ruben Sayes, covering Chris Wilder. And so, yeah, I feel like I've been here, there, and everywhere at the minute. It'd be nice to get back into a standard video doing our normal stuff rather than being heightened on Chris Wilder phobia.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure you've been bombarded with media offers after the news. We'll certainly touch on that. But Chris Wilder's former club Middlesbrough have had quite the opposite, a brilliant start to the season. So I'm delighted to be joined by Mr. Johnny Bullock from the Borough Breakdown. Johnny, thanks so much for joining us. A 2-2 draw at Preston last time out, which ends Middlesbrough's 100% winning record. So doesn't happen every week that you win, but you must be thrilled with how things are going.
No, I'm disappointed now with that draw. Get Edwards out, bring Michael Carrick back, do something like Sheffield United will do. Look, yeah, it's still great to be unbeaten. Really happy with Borough's start, an unexpected start as well. I didn't expect us to be atop the league after the first 5 games, to be honest with you. And the draw at Preston helped us understand a little bit more about this side and how would we react if we went a goal behind. Can we make the tweaks needed to get back into a game? And do we have the players to do that as well? And that helped tick a couple more boxes that we needed to see, but there's still so much to learn about this side. I feel like every time I watch them, though, I'm still getting Luton, Towns, Rob Edwards just playing in red. And that's just becoming a bit more transparent as we're starting to learn more about this team. But yeah, a really good start, really happy with it. And there's still a lot more question marks that I feel like still need to be answered if we're going to be up there come the end of the season.
Absolutely. Ollie, I remember you mentioning Sverre Nipan, who they signed on loan from Manchester City when we did the Sportsman with you a few weeks ago. He obviously was instrumental in the equaliser for Middlesbrough last time out. Just can you just talk a bit about why you're so excited about this signing for the Borough?
Yeah, I really like Sverre Nipan. I know that he's not being managed to break in. He's not the starter right now. Obviously, he's still sort of learning his craft, particularly obviously over in England since his big move to Manchester City and then the loan to Middlesbrough. But for me, he is just a player who will unlock so much for this Borough team. I think the way that he can pick his passes, the way that he can get forward, he glides past defenders when he's got the ball at his feet. He's just a joy to watch. And I think we've seen that in bits and starts. You know, I'm thinking about Millwall away. Him coming off the pitch, him coming off the bench and having such an impact in terms of the way that he's playing forward. He is somebody who just excites me. I think, and I've said this, maybe I'll look a bit more stupid after they absolutely battered Manchester United yesterday, but I maintain that I think Nipan will be starting for Manchester City in the next 18 months. Because I think he's that level of a talent. I think he's somebody who's going right to the very top of the game. And I think by the end of this season, we will all just be honoured to have seen him playing in the Championship and sort of gracing us at this level. I think particularly, you're seeing it already this season in terms of the attacking contributions that he can bring to any team. His movement off the ball, his control of the ball, his movement with the ball. I just love him. Johnny, come on, back me up on this. I mean, I know that it's been early days. He's only coming off the bench at the moment. He's not breaking in. But when he's on the ball, you can just see his different gravy. I saw it against Sheffield United earlier this season when by the time he'd come on the pitch, I think from the point he came on to the end of the game, you should have scored 4. Never mind everything that had gone before.
Yeah, he's a top talent in Ilya. I'm really excited by Sverre Nipan, and you can see why Manchester City have paid 12.5 million for him, to be honest. But when you look at him, I think if you take a step out and look at Norwegian football's development, I think there's 2 great articles when I was doing our lowdown on him, which I was trying to get a bit more of an understanding of his way on his development. But there's one called Inside the Norwegian FA by John Hoggard and The Next Generation by Jamie Wright Carright. And it just explains how it's all around street football, game-based learning, how to play on the half-turn, how to unlock stuff. And you can just see it in abundance. And he's a really exciting talent, honestly. I can't wait for him to develop this year. I think he's going to love being at Middlesbrough. And I think he's going to love... I think we're going to love having him as well. And they always say don't fall in love with a lone player. But bloody hell, we've had Cameron Archer, Ben Dork, and now Sverre Nipan in nearly consecutive seasons. So it's going to be a love affair, I think. But he's a special talent. But I definitely think just watch him grow, let him develop now, and I think you'll get the best out of him, to be honest, especially in that 10 role.
I think he's at the right club as well, and I think that's the main thing that really stands out to me. Is, you picked out some players there, but I'm thinking more about take Ben Doak last season as well. Middlesbrough feels like a really fantastic breeding ground for players, attacking players in particular, to really come and flourish. It's a perfect situation where, because of the strength of the rest of the squad, particularly that midfield, Hackney and Morris, and the way that they play and the way that they can almost control the game, both going forward and defensively, they allow these attacking players to be able to flourish. And I think Nipan coming into that kind of setup around him is just going to give him everything he needs to be a creative player, to be a free player, to be able to play in those roles and to really hurt teams in the way that he wants to when he's got the ball. And with that little bit of freedom, I think it's perfect. I think it's the right place. And, I say this as somebody who wishes he'd come to us, but I think he's in the right place for his development. And it feels like just a match made in heaven to me. And I think as the season goes on, we will see him just come more and more into his own.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, sorry, Cam, I was just going to say to round this off, but I think from a Middlesbrough identity standpoint, what this club's about, it's all about developing players. We're a development club, and we always have been, really, in terms of some of the talent that we've always been able to bring through. And I think even more now in how we're positioned as a team and as a club, it's just all about development. You can see it in the coaching staff that we've had, like Aaron Danks, Eddie Vivesh, like 2 big development coaches. Rob Edwards was at England under-20s. Michael Carrick was a big player in terms of player development when he was at Manchester United. And Jonathan Woodgate has also developed a lot of players when he's been coaching as well. So we've had just an identity of coaches come in, and it's just bringing these younger players on, and that's all what we're about now. And it's great because we have these starlets come in and they can shine over a smaller period and then get sold or even be in a first team elsewhere in the next 12 months after that.
Yeah, absolutely. Are we seeing signs, Johnny, that Middlesbrough have got some of the ingredients that we felt like they were lacking last season?
They look better defensively, I would say. I think the previous year, it was all about how many goals can we score versus the opposition. I think now it's trying to build a base of more defensive solidity. But weirdly now it's like the opposite, where we look fairly solid defensively, but we don't create much from open play. We've relied heavily on, I would say, set piece or individual errors to create something. It's only really been that, I would say, a little bit of the Preston game, one couple of key moments here and there, one against Sheffield United, and then one against Millwall. So it's like 1 or 2 moments where we're punishing sides. Whereas last year we were creating loads and loads of chances, we just couldn't defend for our lives. So I would say it's one big question mark, and one thing to keep an eye on Middlesbrough the next few weeks. Will they be creative, and will it be sustainable over the next few weeks? Because they're not looking at the data, right? It's far too early, but Middlesbrough's numbers aren't just, they're not as high as probably what they should be, or for a team that's going to be competing towards the back end of the season in the playoff spots.
I think there's a really funny one, though, obviously, reflection on that United game, because, you talk there about the creativity and the other bits, but I tell you, if Delano Bergzorg could just shoot when he gets the opportunity, you'd have beat us about 4-0, and it'd have been hard for anybody to argue that it wouldn't have been a deserved victory. But I think for me, that's one of the really interesting things about Borough this season is there have been so many question marks for so many seasons about that kind of trade-off between the defensive stability against the attacking excitement and that creativity that takes you forward, and that really has been fantastic to watch, but maybe at the detriment of results. You referenced it there in terms of that when you played against United, and I know obviously it was only a couple of games ago, and obviously it was a little bit different against Preston with the sort of goals conceded there, but I was so impressed with just how difficult it was. And don't get me wrong, we don't create chances against anybody under Ruben Sellers, but we just couldn't get anywhere near you. And that was with Gustavo Harmer, with Callum O'Hare. What do you think it is about the role of that sort of midfield pairing and how important they are in that defensive stability? Because for me, while the defense stood up to all of the challenge, it was Morris and Hackney who cut down any space. So where are tens, where Callum O'Hare wanted to play in the space, where last season he was able to have all the freedom of Bramall Lane on the ball, this season Hackney or Morris were always there. Their energy getting backwards was just a complete game changer in terms of Borough's defensive shape and the way they could stop United from creating. It feels sustainable to me, but what do you think about sort of their role defensively in terms of solidifying that defense?
Just look at Aidan Morris. I think I would say if you want to watch Middlesbrough now, I'll just watch him. He is a player that is just evolving to be probably one of Hackney Borough's best player, or could be Borough's player of the year. To be honest, if you look at Middlesbrough's shape in and out of position, he plays a little bit deeper, and Hackney will play as like more of a ball progressing 8, and then you play with like a 3 behind the centre forward. It's what you understand it from there, but from a defensive standpoint, you've got that solidity there and a good base it's like a 5-5, isn't it? When you do the 3-2, and then from there, so they're massively instrumental. But I think both on and off the ball, everything comes through those two players. One's the sweeper, one's the progressor, and then additionally to that as well, in the first game, in the first half against Millwall, Middlesbrough were always trying to go from centre back to 10, centre back to 10, but now it's very much centre back, Morris to Hackney. Hackney, you progress the play, get it into the 10. And now with Strelic and with Nepan, you can have the option now to go, someone can play a little bit deeper, pick it up, and then play it off to the 10. Or someone with Nepan's quality can just play on that half turn and get Borough forward as well. So Middlesbrough getting different layers, which is brilliant, and that'll help us build a bit more sustainability. But yeah, those two in the middle, Morris is really key to all of it defensively. He is such a brilliant talent, and Hackney will always get the plaudits. But for me, Morris has probably been Borough's best player over the last few games. To be honest, I think he's been excellent.
Absolutely. Just finally, a comment. We've had a comment from Gokul Garg. Sorry. Is Luke Ayling as the right centre half a problem long term? Because obviously playing right of A3 does tend to lean better towards defenders who are quick and strong. I mean, Ayling's reasonably strong, but in terms of that athleticism and dealing with 1v1s, how do you see that sort of position playing out?
I think from January he'd be taken out. I think Adilson Malanda coming from Charlotte essentially stops one of Borough's biggest weaknesses, and it's pace at the back. We don't have the pace. We are literally one ball over the top away from being cut open and being put in behind. I think we've been fortunate to some capacity that a lot of teams that we've faced already have a striker that like to play back to goal. And like to pin a defender. We haven't had someone who runs in behind yet. Josh Sargent, when he did do it, he created us a lot of problems in that Norwich game. So I think teams will start to pick up on that even more. But for me, Luke Ayling's been excellent in the right centre-back role. He's definitely improved a lot, and he's become a lot more protected in terms of space. But I expect him to be taken out. Now we have Darragh Lenihan fit again. We'll see Borough potentially shift even more. And when Dale Fry is back from his calf injury, I think Ayling will most likely be the person that drops out the side. You have that solidity there. But Malanda, for me, will nullify Boro's biggest weakness because he has really good recovery pace. He's a much more athletic centre half, which will hopefully nullify that come January time.
And just one more question from me then, Johnny, because I know you're travelling this evening, so we won't keep you much longer. But in terms of Boro's prospects this season, are you more optimistic and still a little bit cautious because you feel like, I mean, if I look at the fixtures coming up, not that you've had easy fixtures by any means in the opening 5 games, but coming up, you've got West Brom, Southampton, Stoke, 2 teams that are right towards the top of the league and another that's a parachute payee. You've got Portsmouth away, going to Fratton Park's tricky, and then Ipswich at home. That's a tough run of fixtures, isn't it?
Yeah, the first 10 games for us this year, we couldn't have had a probably harder start, to be honest. Look, I'm still not massively on the Kool-Aid yet, to be honest. I'm very much feel like I'll be getting lynched in Teesside before I go tonight. My car tyres will be slashed. But I'm not on the Kool-Aid
going
yet.
to New York, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. But I just think we started very well. We'll learn more in the next 5 games of where we think we'll be. Creativity is the big one. Will we be able to unlock even more? We've got the players to do it. Will it keep happening? And how do we react to a setback? But yeah, let's see where we end up in the next 5 games, to be honest. But not on the Kool-Aid yet. I still said, but we even did our prediction show. I said 8 to 10 still, because I'm just not convinced yet. Mainly just because I'm so pessimistic and so burnt from this team over the last 3 or 4 years of my life. I just can't trust them anymore. So
you've used the words I'm not on the Kool-Aid yet. I'm looking forward to the moment when we can say, yes, Johnny's on the Kool-Aid. That'll be a nice moment.
Yeah, I'll be back on the shows, Gab. I'll be on the shows telling them we're going up.
Yeah, exactly. Great stuff, Johnny, and lovely to have you on, mate.
Yeah, perfect. Cheers, guys. Lovely to speak to you as always. See you in a bit.
Top man.
Cheers.
Ollie, I think we can't have you on the show this week and not talk about the news at Sheffield United. Chris Wilder's back for a 3rd stint. It's becoming a bit like a Darren Ferguson at Peterborough, isn't it, or a Martin Allen at Barnet? You know, the club going back to one manager and again. Are you pleased that the club have made these decisions?
I think we had to do something. We had to change something because obviously it had been bad enough as it was, but Friday night, I mean, that was just an embarrassment. And you could see it not just in the manager, but in the players. They gave up. They just did not want to represent the club. They didn't want to be there for the last half an hour of the game. I'm not sure Ben Godfrey wanted to be there for the entire 90 minutes up against Philogene. But yeah, and so something had to change after what happened on Friday. And, you know, over the summer, I was on board with the idea that we might move away from Chris Wilder. I thought it made sense. You know, he'd been our manager for the majority of the last 10 years now. In 2 stints. And if we wanted to modernise the club and we wanted to go down a different route in terms of the new ownership, the new strategy, the new transfer plans, it made a lot of sense for us to be trying something different. It didn't work. And we cannot emphasise how much it didn't work in terms of just being a disaster start to finish. Obviously, everyone can see in terms of the points tally, in terms of the fact we've scored 1 goal so far this season, in the terms of the fact that we've conceded, 12 goals, 13 goals in 5 games. Everything's gone wrong. And so, in the current context, I think Wilder's the only man who could really come into Bramall Lane and it not be a toxic atmosphere. I think he will be a unifying force that brings the fans back together. I think there'll still be some doubts about whether he's the right man long term, but right now that doesn't matter. We need somebody who's going to be the right man short term. And with Chris Wilder in charge, this season is not a complete write-off. You know, we're 9 points behind Coventry in 6th. It's been 5 games of the season. There's every chance that Chris Wilder can turn this team into somebody who can compete for 5th, for 6th in the playoffs. There's every chance he can make us competitive again. And that's what we need right now. And so there's very much question marks over the owners about what the long-term vision looks like now, about how this develops. But for the here and now, Chris Wilder's got to be the right man to take United forward.
What I like about this appointment that it does open up the feeling of what's possible for this season, Ollie. Because if you look at it really simplistically, which is, as I've sometimes said in the past, the only way I can look at it, I think if you extrapolate that, if you use the form that Chris accumulated last season, which was basically 2 points a game, there is a good chance that you can get a points tally this season that's in the somewhere in the 80s, I would think. And if it's a low bar for automatic promotion this season, then it might be that 80 to 85 points still gets you in there. And if Sheffield United can get a run of wins early doors under Chris Wilder, the season sort of opens up for you again. So again, using that simplistic sort of mathematical logic, this does, this can breed a bit of optimism in terms of what's possible this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, from my perspective, I don't think anyone's going to be talking about automatic promotion right now. I don't think that's on people's minds.
Okay.
I just think it seems so far away, not just in terms of the points, but the squad, the way it's looked so far this season is we've not looked anywhere near a team who could be at that level. I think playoffs is still a realistic target. I think if we'd waited too much longer, if we'd let sort of 6, 7, 8 games go by, then all of a sudden it becomes a long shot to even get into the playoffs. I think Wilder gives us a chance at the playoffs. And I think more than anything else, I said there, I don't know what it means long term for the vision of the owners, for the vision of the club.
Yeah.
I actually do think that there's another angle to it, though, which is that long term, this is the best possible outcome for Sheffield United, because Chris Wilder has left an unfinished story at Bramall Lane twice. The first time he was our manager, we were incredibly good until lockdown. And then all of a sudden, we were 4th in the Premier League, lockdown. And the next time I was sat at Bramall Lane, Chris Wilder wasn't our manager and we were bottom of the Premier League. And you were sat there saying, there was no natural occurrence for that to change. We didn't get to sit there as fans in the ground and have a collective experience where we said goodbye, where we came to the end of this great journey. And so it felt unfinished. And so throughout Slavisa Janovic's time, throughout Heckingbottom's time, there was this noise in the background. Chris Wilder, he's got to come back at some point. He needs to finish. He could have us better than this. He would be the one who takes us forward. And so Wilder came back, and obviously last season came this close to being the ultimate Sheffield United legend, because he was 20 minutes away from probably being the biggest Sheffield United legend of all time, because he would have delivered us the win at Wembley that we've been waiting for forever, that nobody alive today has ever seen us win at Wembley, and he was that close to delivering it. And then again, it felt unfinished. It felt like it wasn't a natural break point. And whether I would have made the change or not, it's fair to say that it still feels unfinished. And a big part of Ruben Sayers' time at United is that he was handed a hospital pass. He was given a PR disaster from the owners in the sacking Wilder on 90 points to bring in the guy who only just kept Hull up. Well, that was a PR disaster from the start. So Wilder's name was always in the background, was always sitting there waiting. And so this needs to be the natural end. We could break it down into story structure. We had the beginning, we had the middle. This has got to be the end now. The last time that Chris Wilder's Sheffield United manager, because we need as a club to be able to move on, but it needs to come to a proper end. Let it play out. I don't want to see it. I don't want to see Wilder leave next summer and it be, he did all right and he's leaving next summer. This needs to be a proper breakdown of Chris Wilder will be Sheffield United manager until he decides to retire and ride off into the sunset, or until it goes so badly that the fans and everybody agrees it's time to change. It can't be another one of these, maybe he should have stayed. I'm not so sure. It needs a natural end. We don't need another unfinished symphony. We need the full song. And I think this has got to be the time to do that. And I think for the long term of the club, it's what we need. So I'm delighted to have him back. I'm delighted that we can look forwards this season with a lot of positivity. And hopefully this can be a glorious end to a fantastic love affair of Sheffield United and Chris Wilder.
Chris Wilder's Sheffield United tenure started with Sharpie getting the beers in. It probably needs to finish that way, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah. I think what I'm really curious about, Ollie, is Chris Wilder's going to have very high standards for some players in terms of they've got to fight for the badge. And it's interesting seeing you make that expression, because I feel like there's going to be some players that are going to be sort of collateral damage because he's not going to accept it. But there's also going to be some players where it's like he's going to have to give them a second chance, an opportunity, because that's the situation. So which are the ones that Chris Wilder's going to look at and think, I'm not having you, and which are the ones he's going to look at and think, you know what, I'm willing to give you a chance?
I think it's going to be really interesting to see what the answer to that question is, in all honesty. If I was saying today, I think the players who will come out the worst from this agreement will be Ben Godfrey and will be Louis Barry. I think they're the two who will find themselves in a difficult situation. Because if I was guessing, and it is only guessing, you can't guarantee anything. If I was guessing what Wilder's going to do, I would imagine Gustavo Harmer starts on the left wing on Saturday. Goes back to the position he played for the majority of last season.
Oh, yeah, it'll be as close to last season's template as humanly possible, won't it?
And so with that in mind, where does Louis Barry fit in this Sheffield United team? Because he's not better than Gustavo Harmer. He's had a really disappointing start to the season. I think if you looked at his, and I'm not picking him out specifically, it's just because of the question, but if you looked at his work rate and some of the defensive abilities that he brings, shall we say, he's not somebody who massively fits the system and who runs his blood to water to give these most for the club. That's just not what we've seen.
I've never heard that expression, runs his blood to water.
You've never heard run your blood to water? Oh,
never heard it once in my life.
Maybe it's a Sheffield thing. Run your blood to water. My dad says it all the time. Every time I came off a football field, he'd judge me on two things. He wouldn't care if I'd scored, if I'd played rubbish. It didn't matter how I'd performed. His question would always be, have you got blood or water? And if I'd got blood, I'd not played anywhere near good enough. And if I'd got water, I'd done all right.
Awesome.
But yeah, I think it's a really interesting one. So I think Barry will struggle because Harmer will take that position in the squad. And I think Godfrey, after his performance on Friday night, might just be collateral damage that somebody's got to take the fall for it. Yeah. And sadly, he might end up being that man.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think he's obviously can't have a transfer window, which is almost hilarious because it's like, what a waste. But, that's where we are.
Yeah.
But I do think in those circumstances, it's going to be, can we rely on the muscle memory of this is what we did last season and we're close to last season template. So I agree with you about Louis Barry. I could see him being an option on the bench possibly to bring something different. But I don't think he starts.
No, I don't. Do you know what I would like to see though? It's a question, but what I would potentially like to see, Louis Barry play on the right wing. He doesn't do it. He's not done it very often. He's a left winger. He cuts inside, shoots with his right foot, and tries to find the far top corner. But play him on the right wing. Let's see what he can do in terms of beating his man, getting to the byline, getting a cross into the box. Let's see his delivery rather than a focus on trying to get a shot off all the time. Let's see how he can create for the other players. Because I think he could be such a problem if he can get his winger exposed one-on-one, down to the byline, dragging it back across goal. That could be really exciting. And the right wing is a position where United are struggling right now. Andre Brooks isn't a natural fit. Chidozie Ogbene might be fantastic there, but he's coming back from a really serious injury. I think there's a really interesting question about what happens down the right wing because we've got some options, but is Ogbene fit? Is he going to be back to his best? We don't know. Brooks is inconsistent and flatters to deceive. And so maybe Barry's an option on the right wing. And it's an interesting debate that's going to come. But yeah, I think he might be the highest profile calamity of this managerial change.
Absolutely. Well, on to West Bromwich Albion, back to our theme of high flyers.
Well, we're the only team that's gone 5 out of 5 this season.
The table's upside down. Chris, great to have you on from Albion Analysis. Thanks so much for joining us. I know fathers have loads of time on their hands, so it's not that big a commitment.
But, honestly, Gab, I'll take jokes like that. But if my missus overhears gags like that, you're in trouble.
Okay, I'll keep it quiet then. Lovely to see you, mate. Thanks for coming on. What do you make of the Albion start to the season? Obviously, a disappointing result against Derby at the weekend, but overall, a fantastic start.
Yeah, pretty good start. I mean, as an Albion fan, you kind of have to just take a defeat to Derby on the chin. That's 6 consecutive defeats to Derby now, and we've won the XG
all over again, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah, we've won the XG in every single one of them. So, I mean, and I know people look at stuff like that and go, "Oh, look at him." You know, XG isn't real goals. No, I'm aware of that, but the point is, normally when you're losing to a team time after time after time, it's because they've got some sort of like something over you that you can't deal with. You know, like a physical presence or something like that. But what we have done 6 times in a row now is had the better of the game against Derby and somehow contrived to lose. That's kind of impressive in its own sad, pathetic little way. It's like we continue to be the better team in games against Derby and lose. And fair play to Derby. They must be laughing all the way to the bank because, I mean, their fans were singing, "Can we play you every week?" And honestly, I believe they feel like that. But yeah, in terms of the start overall, decent, Gab, and promising. I think there's a little bit of shades of last season where we started really strongly and people got a little bit overexcited and HMS walk the league. We were all well on board it and everything like that.
Why do you use the word walk there, Chris?
Yeah. There was another word used on X, but not for this pod. But yeah, and I think maybe we got a little bit overexcited as well this time. You know, Ryan Mason was going to be that next great manager, and we pulled together this great squad in a great transfer window, and I don't think it's all quite as perfect as maybe the initial results had us believe. We won 3 games out of 4 by a single goal, all basically scoring our XG. So and to be honest, conceding in and around the same XG as we scored. So we quite easily could have, other than the Blackburn game where we were pretty dominant, we probably could have drawn with Wrexham and you wouldn't have said it was a horrendously unfair result. I think probably the same was true at Stoke as well. And I think and the Portsmouth result, to be honest, was probably the harshest one because we were on the wrong end of 2 appalling refereeing decisions, which would have won us the game. But I felt like, whilst I joke about the hoodoo of Derby and everything like that, that a kind of sucker punch result was coming a little bit because we weren't blowing teams away. We were nicking games by the single goal. And when you're doing that small margin stuff, and it's very shades of Corberan, by the way, this is the sort of thing that we found ourselves on the wrong end of for about 12 games in a row under Corberan, when we just drew and drew and drew and drew because it was such low margin stuff. And this is, by the way, a compliment to Ryan Mason. We haven't moved on massively from Corberan. But that's a positive. Status quo from Carlos Corberan is a positive. I thought you
lost some of those principles under
we did.
Tony Mowbray.
We did. Yeah, 100%. And I think that's what I'm saying. I think what I'm saying is Ryan Mason has got us back a little bit to the defensive organisation that we had last season. But what he hasn't been able to do, even with quite a bit of squad turnover this window, is he hasn't been able to find the real attacking thrust for us to blow teams away in games. But that was the same problem Carlos Corberan had all the way through his reign. So that's not a criticism of Mason.
Well, there's a couple of things that I wanted to bring up with you, Chris. The first one was creativity in midfield. We've seen that partnership of Mowatt and Malumbi has served a real purpose for West Bromwich Albion. But I just wonder at home, I think we saw this possibly against Portsmouth and possibly against Derby at the weekend. Does that duo in midfield give you the creativity that you need to really carve teams open?
Maybe not, and I do understand where the argument comes from on that. What I would say about Jason Malumbi, because I honestly thought when Toby Collier came in that Jason Malumbi was going to end up being the fall guy for him, because I don't believe Man United lent us Toby Collier to stick him on the bench. Toby Collier is not a million miles away from the Man U first team, and I don't think he's been lent to a Championship club to not play. So I think at some point Toby Collier starts for us. And I was pretty confident that the one who was going to drop out was Jason Malumbi. I'm not so confident anymore. I mean, Jason Malumbi has the highest expected assists of any Albion player so far this season. He had 2 shots on goal and probably tested Zetterstrom as much as anybody on Saturday. Had one where Zetterstrom had to turn it around the post, and the other one rattled the bar and I think has landed somewhere in the car park behind the Smethwick end. To be honest with you, he hit it that hard. And Malumbi's been a real threat. You know, on the weekend, he had the most progressive passes, the most passes into the final third. He's doing a lot of things you don't really associate with Jason Malumbi.
Right.
Alex Mowat is going quietly and calmly about his business the way he always does. But I just wonder whether a Ryan Mason team needs just a little bit more dynamism than Alex Mowat can ever produce. The other thing with Alex Mowat is for nearly 2 years now, he's played practically every game. And this is a guy who has at one point had to have a quite serious operation to sort out a problem that he played through for about 3, 4, 5 months.
Sure.
And I don't necessarily think, you know, he's obviously into his 30s now. And I don't necessarily think that he's a guy, you know, who can play every single game. Yeah. So I think that Toby Collier is going to come into that midfield at some point. I wouldn't be absolutely stunned if it was for Alex Mowat.
Right. Ollie, what have you made of West Bromwich Albion's start? Because as much as they've had some challenges breaking teams down at home, they've also been a very strong away team so far this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think actually for me, one of the things that's been most impressive is obviously it's the start of a young manager's career. And I think as much as anything else, it's probably harder to make sure you've got that kind of away stability that the club have been able to bring together. I think there's obviously been moments where there's been concerns. And I think one of the bits that I've been most interested in, Chris, and the bit that's stood out to me more than anything else is that I was really excited for Ona Hegerberg at the start of the season. He was a player who, you know, I bet on just about every week to score. And I was like, this will be the week. This will be the week. He's definitely going to score this week. But I think maybe his role in the team has been quite different so far this season. He's not obviously looks like being the player who's going to be putting the ball back of the net at the moment. How are you finding that sort of transition to his role? And do you think unlocking him maybe is the key to sorting out some of that attacking play, particularly at home where it's been a little bit stodgy?
I get what you're saying, Ollie, and look, I did. I've got to be honest. Very quickly, my anytime goal scorer bet moved to Isaac Price before the bookmakers got a little bit wise to that one in recent weeks, unfortunately. But in terms of Ona Hegerberg, it's worth saying that he's had the second most XG out of anybody in the team, only 0.1 behind Isaac Price. So he is getting chances. He's 16th in the division for the XG that he's had. So it's not like he's not getting chances. I think he just needs one to go in. I think it's just that typical old school striker thing. And we talked about this on the pod this week. I think part of the problem for Ona Hegerberg is that your striker really, you know, when you've got a new striker, okay, you know, if you're a Premier League team and you've brought in Gyökeres or Voltemade or someone like that, you know, you can give the ball to Gyökeres and he beats 3 players and he sticks in the bottom corner, or Voltemade puts in a wonderful header into the top corner or whatever. But when it's a championship striker, what you really want to get off and running is that nice little 6-yard box tap in. And where we've created a little bit of a problem for that is that Tom Fellowes going was, you know, obviously happened and we need to deal with that. But Tom created those kind of chances. He got to the byline and he cut the ball back either to the penalty spot or across the 6-yard box. Now we've got Mikey Johnston, a right footer on the left. We've then got Jed Wallace, who, God love him, has a lot of qualities, but unfortunately, bursting past his man on that right-hand side and getting balls across from the byline is not one of them.
Does Dilling Jr. come in for Jed Wallace, do you think, Chris?
But therein, again, Gab, lies another problem. Left footer on the right, if you do that. Right. So you're still not solving that problem. You know, he's got that pace, but from what it appeared on Saturday when he came on against Derby, his right foot is for standing on and standing on only, because every time he wanted to be back on that left-hand side. if you want to create those kind of chances, and Ryan Mason has shown he's not averse to this, is you could start with Illing Jr. and Johnston as your wingers and swap them.
Right,
And have Mikey going down the line and putting the ball across from the right hand side with his right foot, and the same with Illing Jr. on the left on his left foot. And I would like to see that. I'm not against those two as our wingers, but I'm not in love with Illing Jr. on the right. I'd like to see him on the left. And what that then means is that you have to switch Mikey Johnson across. But that's where Mikey played almost all of pre-season. When we all thought that that Tom was going and it was inevitable, there was then a hiatus of thinking Tom was going, and we thought he was staying, especially after Hegem left. But I think there's an option there. And to your point, Ollie, on Hegebert, I don't think it's that he's not that penalty box striker. I just think it's that we're not creating those type of chances, and largely because for 2 out of the 5 games we haven't had Tom Fellows. And I think that's a problem we've got to solve, because we didn't go like for like and replace Tom Fellows. We didn't sign a right-footed right winger, and I think it's taken something away from the team. And I think it's a problem that Ryan Mason has got to solve, because whilst inverting wingers is very much the vogue in football, I think in the Championship there's a lot to be said for it'll work plenty in the Premier League because that's how teams play and you want your wide men scoring. I think there's a lot to be said for in the Championship, just at times having that option of somebody who can get to the byline and get the ball into the 18-yard box or into the 6-yard box.
Absolutely. Chris, just a quick word on West Brom's chances this season. Are you more optimistic than you were before the start of the season that you might have a sniff at top 6?
Yeah, for a number of reasons, Gab. Not least because the 3 relegated clubs haven't exactly pulled up any trees. I think the big problem when before the season started was you looked at the previous 2 seasons where the parachute payment clubs had just absolutely dominated everything, and you looked at that and you said, well, you'd got 4 clubs with parachute payments. Based on the previous 2 seasons, there seemed an inevitability they'd be the top 4, plus Birmingham spending like a parachute payment club, and which kind of almost, if you worked on the basis that the big spenders would be the top 5, that left one space for everybody else to scrap for. Now that might still be the case, but as it started, whilst Leicester's league position says that they've started well, I don't think any Leicester fan is going to be jumping up and down about the football they've played in the opening weeks of the season. Sheffield United are obviously a disaster and have ended up sacking their manager after 5 games. Sorry. Ipswich have been pretty slow to start, even though the underlying data for them has actually been pretty good. And you know, as I say, even Blues have kind of like laboured a little bit at the start of the season, and Saints haven't been great either. So I think there's an opportunity there for clubs like ourselves, Middlesbrough, Coventry, who were probably looking, and Norwich, looking at the start of this season and going, it's going to be pretty hard if we're that clutch of clubs fighting for one place. Suddenly, I think it's starting to look like it might end up being 3 or 4 spaces that we can all fight for. And I think that makes you optimistic. I think where I'm a little bit concerned up until January is, have we got the depth in attacking areas if Daryl DK and Tamar Bani continue to have injury problems? And that's my biggest worry. If those 2 players can get fit and stay fit, I actually think we've got some really, really strong options in attacking areas. But unfortunately, at the moment, we've got 2 players there that have failed to prove their fitness up to this point. And if they stay injured, we are really, really light in attacking areas. I think we'll have a little bit of money to spend in January because we haven't spent the Tom Fellows money yet. And I think if we're well placed come January, I think what you might see is an Albion board roll the dice a little bit in January and sort of go, let's see if we can push on using that Tom Fellows money. But up until January, I think a lot depends on whether Bani and DK can get fit and contribute, because if they can't, we're relying on a really small pool of attacking players to solve the problem that we've already had this season, that particularly at home, we struggle to break teams down.
Absolutely. Chris, it's been a pleasure to get your insight on, and thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, mate.
Yeah, top man. Delighted to be joined now by Locks from Blue Tinted Glasses, the Leicester City fan channel. Locks, good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. You must be pretty happy. Leicester City were kind of underestimated, possibly the least favoured of the three relegated clubs coming down from the Premier League going into the Championship season, and so far you've performed the best.
What were you all thinking, eh? The least favourite out of the three. Come on. No, no, of course, there's still doubt there, right? We still don't know the future of the points deductions. That's still yet to come. But as I said to you before the season even started, Gab, I'm not too worried at all. I think we've got more than enough. You know, there's been several performances already this season that haven't quite been good enough, but we've still had the quality there to get over the line. I think a lot of other Championship fans as well expect us to maybe lose Abdul Fattawu, who, you know, the biased here, but I think is the best player in the league. I understand. Yeah, that's what.
Mate.
Well, I don't think it's that hot. Maybe I'm wrong, but yeah, that's the way I see it. And we've got plenty other quality across the pitch. You know, when you see the likes of Harry Winks not even starting for us at the moment, although I don't think it'll be long before he is starting, but, you know, he's not left. Wout Faes is still here, who dominated at the back 2 years ago, not so much last year in the Premier League. Yannick Vestergaard's had a great start to the season. Steffi Mavididi, 17 goals and assists 2 years ago. No Jamie Vardy, but we've brought in 3 players on deadline day. Jordan James, Aaron Ramsey, who had a interesting start to his time at Leicester, and Julian Kranza, the striker, who we're yet to see. So there's excitement there from those 3 new players. See what they can bring, and yeah, mate, I'm still looking at those top 2 spots. I don't, you know, unless the EFL hit us with 15 points or more, you know, I still think we're going to be there or thereabouts. I think a 9-point deduction. I think Leicester City still have a good chance of second place.
By the way, Locks, I don't know what Ollie thinks about this, but I think it's an absolute disgrace that we're still talking about points deductions at this, you know, while the season's actually started. I'm not sure I'm a big fan of points deductions anyway, but certainly at least get them sorted before the season starts so that you're not second guessing what's going to happen. You want it to be decided on the pitch, I think.
I think we were charged in April or May, April maybe, for this one. So I mean, in fairness to the EFL, I will say that Leicester do like to can this type of thing down the. They like to kick the can down the road. So it may be our fault, right? It might be our fault that it's taken so long, but still, you know, it's. You know, football is played off the pitch so much these days, and you know, I know Leicester only have themselves to blame, but. You know, we've got 3 charges. You know, there's the overspending, there's the not submitting our accounts because we were kind of in that exposing that loophole that we weren't under anyone's jurisdiction. So we've been charged for that, even though, you know, we were found not guilty of that in the Premier League. And there's another one I'm not too sure on, something to do with the accounts. But yeah, I agree. It's frustrating as a fan, and I would have rather us have probably started the season on -9 points, but that's the rumour. It's 9, but although maybe that would have gone the other way, maybe that wouldn't have been so good. Maybe that would have had a bad effect on the players mentally, seeing -9 and knowing that you have to win 3 to just get to 0. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, I think. So obviously United had our points deduction last season, and ours was announced before we were relegated from the day we were relegated from the Premier League. They announced that we've got a points deduction for the following season. But I think so much of it does come down to that deal that you make with the EFL almost, because United were very keen to make sure that we got our deal in place so that we knew A, what the deduction was going to be, but B, that we weren't going to end up in an embargo or anything else that would affect the transfer business that would come through. And so, yeah, you can certainly see it both ways, but I do think it's ridiculous that we have to sit and wait for these. There's so many clubs in the division that you almost feel as though you're having these conversations about affecting the top and the bottom of the league. And so I think it's better for everybody that these things are sorted outside of the season. either do it pre-season or wait for next pre-season, because doing it during the season just means that nobody knows what target they're aiming for, and it's forever a moving target.
And we found last summer that it really affected our player search, the manager hunt as well when Enzo Maresca left. I think one big reason, I mean, thank God Graham Potter didn't come, looking at his start at West Ham, but apparently rumour has it that he was umming and ahhing because of the points deduction, same with a couple of the players, and we ended up not getting one. And it's like, well, famously Steve Cooper said, it wasn't fair because we missed out on some players, and I think a lot of fans said back, well, you probably wouldn't have had the job, mate, if that was all wrapped up. It would have been Graham Potter. So, but yeah, it's I totally agree. And look, don't get me wrong. 2 years ago when we came down to the EFL, we kind of had two fingers stuck up at them, and we spent what we want. And we brought in massive amounts of money with Harvey Barnes and James Maddison leaving, I think 80 million. But then we spent, I think, 35, 40. Whereas this time round, you're seeing, Leicester have come down reserved. They've not taken the mick at all. That's probably to show the EFL, okay, we've learned our lesson. We're not gonna take the mick this time. £0 spent. We brought in Asmir Begovic on loan, and then three loan signings. So we've not spent a single penny, and we're sat in fourth. So yeah, apparently there were funds to spend, only if it was on the right player. So who knows? January we could strengthen that squad even more. And yeah, I'm confident as I was before. Every time I've spoken to you, Gav, I've been confident.
Yeah, you certainly can.
If you've got money to spend in January and you need a striker, I can think of one who might be available.
Oh, let me guess.
Yeah, if you need Tom Cannon and you want him back at the club, just let us know. I'm sure we can do a deal.
Yeah.
Lux, I wanted to ask you about one of those late summer signings, which was Jordan James. He's obviously a very tenacious midfielder with bags of energy, got some potential with Wales as well. Is he someone you're excited to see more of?
He's the one I'm most excited about. So obviously you won't know this, but I'm actually from Wales. I grew up in Wales, and a lot of my friends, obviously have been watching him. I don't really watch the international football too much, but a lot of my friends have been raving about him. I've got a few Blues friends who obviously spoke a lot about him when he was coming through there, and I saw him with my own eyes against Leicester. If you remember that game 2 years ago where he ran the show, scored 2 goals, and but I think it's something that we've needed in our midfield since Kiernan Dewsbury Hall left. I'm not, he's nowhere near the player Kiernan Dewsbury Hall was 2 years ago, but we've lacked that type of player, I think, who can, run around a lot. He's good on the ball. He can contribute defensively and offensively. I mean, we saw him, our first little snippet of him. He came off the bench on the weekend against Oxford, and he put in a game-saving challenge right, in our own box right at the end, and he's obviously it's all PR training and stuff, but he's pleased the fans a lot as well with some of the stuff he's been saying. I think he's been saying that him and his dad have had long chats, obviously about football, and they've both said that Leicester would be a great club for him, and he'd suit playing for Leicester. So he's ticking all the boxes. I'm looking forward to seeing more. We've kind of got 2 high-paid players in midfield at the moment, Boubacar Samari and Oliver Skipp, and then you've got Harry Winks on the bench as well. So it's a tough midfield for him to get into. Skipp and Samari are average. So I think Jordan James will feature quite a bit. Obviously, he came in on deadline day, then he went straight away with Wales, so he was never going to start against Oxford, but I think Cifuentes saw enough of him even against Oxford in 20 minutes to maybe suggest he could get the start next weekend against Coventry. So yeah, very excited for him, mate. As I am with the others. As I said, Aaron Ramsey getting sent off 25 minutes into your debut. That's a car crash. He's not played much football, of course, over the last couple of years. So hopefully he can come back from that. The problem, though, is he's going to miss 3 games, and then I think it's the international break. So he probably won't play until November, late November or something like that, mid-November. So yeah, there's a lot of encouragement. Again, I think Leicester fans were quite negative about the window. Well, very negative about the window until deadline day. When we saw them 3 come in, we were pretty happy with that in the end. Yeah.
Absolutely. Where was I? I wanted to ask you about Marty Cifuentes so far, Locks, because I think it's fair to say that we've not seen, and possibly there's some situational context here. So when Enzo Maresca was in charge of Leicester 2 years ago, Leicester had, enormous resources for this level. And I suppose that freed him up to be very idealistic about the way that he set the team up. Whereas I think what we've seen from Martí Cifuentes is we've not seen that real clear-cut playing identity where it's like, this is what Leicester City do just yet. But what we have seen is the ability to adapt to the opposition, like you did against us the other Friday, the ability to change games that aren't going his side's way. So he's already shown some pragmatism and adaptability in his early months.
Yeah, I think all but one of the games he's made a substitution at half time. And one of the only criticisms that he's receiving from Leicester fans at the moment is probably the starting 11s. Maybe he's not getting it quite right. He has had a lot to deal with. He's come in and the club obviously aren't spending much money. He had probably 4 or 5 players that were desperate to leave. And he had to juggle, and Harry Winks is one of them, by the way, and he's had to kind of juggle whether to play them or not, whether what to do with them. I mean, the Bilal El Khanous situation, he struggled with a little bit. In the first game against Sheffield Wednesday, he played him. He got 2 assists in that game. For the 2 goals. And in the next 2 games, he was dropped and he didn't play him at all. And Harry Winks was also, he's not started either, as has Wout Faes. And it's interesting, in those, I think, 3 games so far, Wout Faes and Harry Winks have both come on and they've both changed the game. Yeah. But Martí Cifuentes is refusing to start them because I think they've both got a bit of a poor attitude. They definitely did at the start of the season. Harry Winks has been sulking around and walking straight down the tunnel, not going over to the fans and stuff like that all season, although that did change against Oxford on Saturday. So he's had a lot to deal with, but I think every half-time substitution that he's made, has made a real impact. Oxford was a big test for him, and I think some managers maybe would have made a change straight away in the 25th minute, going a man down, but he sat on it and he let it linger and he waited until half time. He made 2 substitutions. Harry Winks, Ricardo Pereira, both on. We dominated the second half for large parts, not all of it, but large parts after that point. We looked much better, and it looked like we had 11. It was 11v11, and I think he got it bang on there. He got it spot on tactically, and yeah, he's just. Honestly, the starting 11 is the only criticism that I can think that I've seen Leicester fans label, throw his way. I think he's understood. He's got to know the club really well. He's been doing a lot of local visits to the pub and interacting with fans in his time off. There was a brilliant video where he sat down with a Leicester historian for an hour and went through all the history of the club. Don't forget, he paid apparently out of his own pocket to come to the club as well. That's something to remember. Oh, right. But also the local, so the reports are that he had to pay 250 grand out of his own pocket to QPR to sort out that legal thing, and Leicester could have Leicester could have paid to it, but apparently Marty's paid for it himself. They're the reports coming out. But also he the local station BBC Radio Leicester, they've been trying to get managers to sit down in the studio with them. For the last manager that did it was Nigel Pearson, 2011. And Cifuentes is the first one to do it since 2011, and he's gone in and he's done about a 45-minute sit-down interview, asking. It didn't seem there were many embargoed questions. It was very, very open, very transparent about all sorts of things, tactically.
Can I just say, Locks, just on a wider championship point, that's really interesting to know, because at QPR there was very much a feeling, and this backs up what we've had Locked for Words come on here, and Clive Whittingham, and he said he actually felt quite sort of kept out of the way, wasn't really allowed to say very much, wasn't able to communicate very much, and it was all kept very in-house. So that suggests that was much more of a Christian Nuri thing at QPR rather than necessarily Cifuentes. So it's really interesting from you to hear that he has been very open, because he probably wouldn't have had that opportunity at his previous club. So just really interesting to flag that.
Yeah. That's it. There's a local pub here, and we played a pre-season friendly out of training ground in the summer, and like 2 hours after the full-time whistle went, there were photos online. He was drinking and having a pie with a load of fans in the pub,
nice.
and so no, he's been brilliant. I honestly can't fault him for his start at the club. Again, he's had a difficult start, and I think he's understanding exactly what it takes to manage Leicester in this current situation that we're in. I think he's brought a lot of calmness. His man management skills seem on a different level compared to other managers that we've had. How he's dealing with certain players, and the Bilal El Khanous situation, I think, it did speak a lot about him, to be honest with you, how he dealt with that. So yeah, the reports are now later down the line that he wanted in the end El Khanous to, Leicester were going to put their foot down and say to El Khanous, you're not going in unless we get this much. Cifuentes, I think, turned around and said, no, I don't want him here. He's going to upset the squad. He needs to go. So yeah, honestly, he's passing with flying colours at the moment. Early days, of course, it only takes 5 losses to turn that around and change everything. But yeah, at the moment, it's all going well. Yeah.
Encouraging signs at Leicester City. Locks, thanks so much for your insight from the Blue Tinted Glasses channel on Leicester City. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks to everyone for watching. Likewise to my co-host Ollie Mann from the Sheffield United Way. And we'll see you again for another Championship podcast next week.